Welcome everyone to the Monday Mindset. It's another great week and we're starting off and we're so glad you're here. We thank you for joining us from the Giant platform and also from LinkedIn and as well some on Facebook. So thanks for joining us. We always appreciate it. No matter how you come, we're glad you're here. And I'm glad to see that face of Kevin DeShazo. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. It's a lovely Monday morning face. My best face, I think.
Oh, good. I see that. Yeah. Well, it was a fun weekend, I bet, for you with your three boys. I know you and your wife really do it up pretty grand when it comes to Halloween, right? With your boys.
We do. We don't mess around. So my kids. So I've got three boys, 11, 9, and 4, and they just go all out. And this has been a thing for years. And my wife, she loves to coordinate their costumes. So we've done superheroes, we've done cops and robbers, we've done Star Wars. Last year was one of the best. We did Three Amigos, and so each of the boys is one of the Three Amigos. They went out for a themed photo shoot. My wife is a photographer, part of what she does, so she just goes all out with these themed photo shoots. This year, we did Ghostbusters, and so our three boys were three of the Ghostbusters, and they've got a baby cousin, and he was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And he's a little baby. And so we went out for a photo shoot around Oklahoma City and downtown. And so we went up on a parking garage. And so we've got our boys like chasing the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. He's coming over them, like over the parking garage. She did some editing, so it looks like the massive monster. It's pretty great. If you guys are watching, want to go check those out, just find one of my social media accounts at Kevin DeShazo, probably on Instagram or Facebook would probably be the easiest. I put some pictures up. But yeah, my wife, she's a creative genius and she has fun with it.
That is so true. She sure is. That is so fun. It's kind of a highlight. I was like anticipating when you posted because I thought it's going to be good. Three Amigos. I didn't know if you could beat that, but this was pretty good.
I didn't either. Three Amigos was outstanding. And our boys, like, they get into it. So number one, they'd never seen Three Amigos when they picked it, and they'd never seen Ghostbusters. And these are their ideas. Like we don't tell them what to be. Like they come up with it, and they plan for like a year. We've gone through a billion different iterations of what they could be for Halloween. And again, this year they wanted to incorporate their little cousin, but they chose Ghostbusters, and they'd never seen the movie, but just decided that was what we're going to do. And somehow that I think topped Three Amigos, which was pretty great.
Oh, that's cool. Sorry about that. I just like pulled up a tool on you. I wasn't trying to confuse you. I was thinking you and your wife probably had like planning meetings of what's our theme this year, but it's really even better that they get to choose it themselves. I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, neat. Well, it's another week, and for some, it's they're thinking, oh no, it's Monday again. And so, what do you have for us to help us set our minds straight this week?
Yeah, I want to talk today about how our mindset impacts how we approach adversity. With the foundational understanding that adversity is part of life. Like hard things happen, adversity happens, life happens. I will say, especially if you're trying to get better, right? If you're trying to get better as a leader, trying to get healthier, trying to lose weight, trying to run a marathon, trying to write a book, trying to get better in some way, shape, or form, adversity always hits, resistance always hits. And our mindset determines how we operate in the midst of that adversity, whether or not we get taken out by that adversity or whether or not we power through that adversity. And I want to give a real life example of the past week of my life. So here in Oklahoma City, we had an epic ice storm in October, which is, I believe, the earliest on record to have an ice storm warning in our state. All the leaves were still on the trees. They hadn't quite changed colors yet. And all of a sudden, this massive ice storm comes through. 3 straight days of freezing rain and sleet and just miserable weather. And this is on top of everything else happening in 2020, right? And so people are losing power. Over 500,000 people at one point lost power. And then Thursday, I believe it was Thursday or Friday, came and they're like, hey, it's going to be warmer, but we're going to have 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. I was like, awesome, thanks. Like we got past the freezing rain and all the ice, and there are tree branches down everywhere. And trees, I mean, we would just be sitting in our house and you would just hear this we live in a historic neighborhood, tons and tons of tall, old trees. So it was really heartbreaking to see all these trees just destroyed. You drove through Oklahoma City in our part of the city and other parts, and it just looked like an F5 tornado and a hurricane came through. I mean, it's just devastating, heartbreaking destruction. And so it was a frustrating week for a lot of people. And we've been without power now, I believe, since Tuesday. Now, we don't have power, don't have internet. And it's been really fascinating to watch people operate through this week. And let's start off by saying, no power, no heat, like that's not fun, right? Nobody's excited to be going through that, but we're all going through it, right? 500,000 people at one point. I think they're down to 140, 150,000 still. And there's no real end in sight. We don't know when we're going to get power. We got a notification yesterday saying everybody should be on by Friday, but they're also hopeful that it's before then. So there's no real end in sight. And so I've been watching people online, kind of the Oklahoma City community on social media, posting about it and dealing with it. And there's two kind of sides. There's one group that their anxiety and stress level is through the roof. And after a couple of days, they start sending hate messages to the power company. They're complaining about everything, complaining that how are their kids going to do virtual school when there's no power? How are they going to work from home with no power? Mental health is struggling, and just getting really, really, really negative and acting like it's a personal attack, right? That this ice storm was a personal attack on them. And some people, like, to the point that they have to go seek like medical help because their anxiety and stress is through the roof. And then you have other people who are like, this sucks, but I mean, it is what it is, right? It's like, it's just life happens, right? Sometimes you get an ice storm in October with all the leaves on the trees, which makes the trees even heavier, and trees shatter, and maybe you're without power. And as long as you didn't have real damage, right, which is a different scenario, right? If you had real damage, like a tree went through your roof or smashed onto your car, or you need power for, breathing for an oxygen machine or something, different scenario. But for most people, it's just an inconvenience, right? It's not that big of a deal. Again, we've been without power since Tuesday. Just kind of figured it out. We went and stayed with family for a couple days. We've stayed in our house for the past couple nights. It's actually been fairly peaceful. We've had game nights with our boys. We opened our front door Saturday and Sunday because of typical Oklahoma. After being in the 30s for 3 or 4 days, it's back up into the 70s. So it was an amazing couple of days having our front door open, which brought in heat into our home to make it a little bit warmer. But you have these two schools of thought. Some people who took it very personally and freaked out and got anxious and negative and complaining, and this is the end of the world and it's awful. And some are like, it's part of it. It is what it is. Let's just make the best of it. And I think that comes down to mindset. Mindset shapes how you operate in the midst of adversity, right? And it's about understanding how you naturally operate under stress, under adversity. Like, do you get negative? Do you freak out? Do you stress out? Well, that may just be your natural response, and that's okay, but you don't have to choose that response, right? That tendency may never go away, but you can choose to recognize that stress, that anxiety, that tendency, and say, you know what? I don't have to freak out because it's actually going to make it worse. Right? My wife and I tried to stay pretty calm and be pretty even keeled through all of it and just deal with whatever kind of came our way. You know what? Our kids dealt with it just fine. They've had no issues. They've been fine. Their school has been without power as well. So they can't go back to school, and they've just been like, whatever. Tell us where to be, when to be there, what we're doing, and we'll figure it out. But if my wife and I had been really anxious and stressed out and kind of freaking out about the whole thing, we would have multiplied that into our kids. And they would have been fearful and stressed out and anxious. And it's like, that's just not who we needed to be. It wasn't going to be helpful. So I think in the midst of adversity, it's reflecting and looking in the mirror and saying, is my mindset full during adversity, or is it harmful? Because your mindset's going to shape how you operate in the midst of that adversity. And I think what I've noticed is a lot of the people who are freaking out are people who have been really stressed out over the course of the year, because they spend a lot of time consuming negative, stressful information, right? They spend all day consuming information about the election and about COVID and about the economy and about all the things going wrong in the world. And what you consume shapes who you become, right? Good and bad. If you eat unhealthy food, you're going to be an unhealthy person. If you eat healthy food, you're going to be a healthy person. If you consume unhealthy information, unhealthy media, you're going to be unhealthy. Like, right? You can be aware and be informed without being consumed, because when you become consumed by these things, it starts to shape who you are. And so it's people who have been really stressed out for 6-7 months. Well, then this ice storm hit. It's like, oh, it's just another thing. Why is this happening to me? Well, it's not. It's just happening. Like most adversity is not happening to you. It's just happening. Life happens. And so I think we have to be really aware of our mindset in the midst of adversity, saying, how is my mindset shaping my response? Right? Am I seeing adversity as just part of the path, as just part of what happens? Or am I treating it as this unexpected, dramatic, overwhelming thing where ultimately we get taken out by small instances of adversity can take you out if you're not prepared, if you don't have the right mindset. Because I think ultimately in life, we have to prepare for adversity, right? It's like we know if you expect adversity to come, you're not surprised by it, right? You may not know what it's going to be, but you know that adversity is going to come. So when it hits, like, I knew something was going to happen. All right, now let's go. Versus the expectation that everything's going to be great, right? The adversity hits and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this at all. Or you're constantly expecting negative adversity. Oh, just another thing, right? And so we have to be really aware of our mindset in the midst of adversity. Lance said it's all perspective. My mom and dad were kind of negative people, so I naturally go towards the negative, and I'm learning that's a choice. I'm starting to see through positive eyes, and I love it, Lance. This is the key point for all of this, right? Your perspective, your mindset is a choice. Right, as I talked about, there's been kind of two schools of thought that I've seen play out over the course of this last week with this ice storm. And it's really the same situation for everyone. Again, taking out those who've had actual damage, actual devastation, more than just being inconvenienced. But for those who have just been like, hey, we're without power, but we're healthy, we're fine, it's just kind of annoying. Everyone's in the same boat, but people are responding in two different ways. And that response is a choice. And that's the key. How you respond to adversity is a choice. Your perspective is a choice. Your mindset is a choice, but it's not going to be that right choice on accident, right? And it's really easy. Like Lance said, well, my family was pretty negative, or the people around me are negative. And we tend to take on those identities, right? We call that the nurture of life, the oughts and shoulds of nurture. They shape how we operate. And it's like, but no, I don't have to operate that way. Because the way they operated is not really going to help me. That's not who I have to be. I can make my own choice in how I respond to adversity. And that's what self-leadership is. And that's really what mindset is about. It's about learning to lead yourself better by learning to think better and believe better so that you can respond better in the midst of adversity. Tracy, what are your thoughts?
I love it. It is a choice, and we can just wallow in our misery and just make everyone around us miserable, right? Or we can just choose. It's a choice. I did earlier, I brought up a tool way too early, but here it is again. That know yourself to lead yourself tool is so helpful because depending on our personality, or like, was it Lance who said about his parents, depending on your upbringing, it comes natural to some people to be a down negative. And you have to become self-aware of that and know your tendencies and stop yourself from some of those behaviors. So can you go through this tool? I know it's very basic for some people who've been in the giant world, but it's brand new for others.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite tools. Well, one of my favorite and one of my least favorites, because it causes you to look at yourself, right? And again, with leadership, we always think our job is to change other people, to make other people better, to get a better response out of them. It's like, no, you can't change other people. Leadership starts by first leading yourself and owning your role in whatever the situation may be. And so we call this tool, know yourself to lead yourself. And the reality is that you have tendencies, right? You have tendencies hard baked into your personality that shape how you act in certain situations. Every time she says this, I roll my eyes. Every time he says this, I get defensive. Every time I get critiqued, I shut down. So recognizing these patterns, these tendencies, and how they've shaped your actions throughout life. I would say, look back through a lot of these significant negative moments in your life, or difficult conversations, difficult moments, and you'll find you had a similar tendency in all of those situations. Like, there's a pattern that's caused me to be in this situation more than once in my life. That's actually me. That's that's not the other person. They're going to have their own tendencies and actions, but I got to look at how I operate. So understanding that those tendencies cause you to take certain actions, and those actions, and they can be good or bad, right? You can have good tendencies and bad tendencies, and sometimes the same tendency is good or bad depending on the context of the situation. But those tendencies cause you to take actions, and those actions have consequences, and those consequences shape your reality. And so I'll give you a real story that this is my kind of go-to story with this tool. I'm not an organized person. Tracy's very aware of this. As we'll be sitting at the table quite often, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a 10:30 call and it's 10:28. She's like, how do you do this? How is this possible? But so I don't like calendars. I don't like structure. I don't like systems. And so I can look back over my life of how that's been a barrier to influence and a cause of frustration to other people who have been around me. And so, real life story, I used to travel before the world shut down. I would travel all the time, and I would be leaving, walking out the door, and my wife would say, hey, where are you going? Like, I see you have your bag. Are you going somewhere? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to New York for 2 days. What are you doing? And she's like, well, you didn't tell me. Like, well, sure I did a month ago. And when we were having this conversation, I told you, like, what, did you not pay attention? Like, what I was really saying to her was, hey, in the midst of running your own business and raising 3 boys and me, you should have remembered this one detail in a conversation 30 days ago and like lock that into your brain. Well, that would frustrate her because she's the opposite. If you know the giant language, she's a nurturer. I'm a connector. So she loves plans. She loves details. She loves structure. She doesn't like surprises, doesn't like plans to change, especially at the last minute. And so now the reality with our relationships that we were frustrated and not talking for probably a day because she was angry that I didn't communicate. And me being, if you're immature, you say, well, that's just who I am. You got to deal with it because I'm not a details person. Well, no, that's lazy. That's hypocritical. Self-awareness is it's a 2-step process. Know yourself, recognize, my lack of organizational skills and lack of using calendars is what caused this. Not her lack of listening. It's me not using a shared calendar where she can know where I'm going to be if it's going to impact her day. Okay, well, I need to change that. And so to change that tendency is not going to go away, but my actions can. And so that's just a real life scenario where I've had to learn to operate. I'm still not great with calendars and structure, but that's not an excuse, right? I don't have to be a 10 out of 10 with those things, but I don't have to settle for being a 2 out of 10. Right? I can work on it and get better and be a 4 out of 10, maybe a 5 out of 10, which lowers her stress level, which means our relationship's going to be better. So know yourself to lead yourself. It's a foundational tool for us. And it's an infinity loop because you should constantly be looking in the mirror and evaluating yourself. And so for this situation, it's, well, what are your tendencies in the midst of adversity? When stress hits, when an unexpected obstacle hits, when adversity hits, what do you tend to do? Do you tend to get really negative? Do you tend to withdraw from people? Do you tend to start getting defensive? Like what do you do when adversity hits? And how does that shape your reality? Right? For most of us during adversity, or especially on the other side of adversity, we have a negative reality with people, whether it's our family, our team, because we don't respond well to adversity. It's our unhealthy tendencies that are causing an unhealthy reality. And so to work backwards and say, wait a minute, I know adversity is going to hit. And I know my tendency is going to be to shut down or to complain or to fill in the blank. But I don't have to do that. I can choose a better action. I can choose a different action. I can learn to lead myself better in the midst of adversity, which is going to allow you to lead others better in the midst of adversity. And that's the real key, because our mindset multiplies, right? So if you're negative, if you're unhealthy, if you start whining and complaining, well, you're just multiplying that to other people. But if you're healthy, you're saying, guys, this is part of it, right? This is life. We signed up for this. We're going to figure out a way through it. It'll be all right. It may be uncomfortable. It may not be fully clear, but we'll get through it, right? It is what it is. Let's keep going. So understanding the way that you naturally respond to adversity, but leveling up to choose a better response.
That's great. And I know within your consulting practice with coaches and teams and all the other industries you work in, you encourage people to keep a log of their tendencies, an actual written log. I know that if you're on the Ascend and you go to resources, there's actually a Know Yourself to Lead Yourself tendency log that you can download. And it's just a great idea to, put it on your desk or maybe your dresser next to your bed, and just in the evenings, as you're kind of acclimating to this life of becoming a little bit more self-aware, jot down the things, or better yet, because you may not see them in yourself, ask your spouse or the person that you live with, tell me some of the tendencies I lean toward during adversity. Mm-hmm. And I know for me personally, I get super busy. The more out of control I feel with life circumstances, the more I try to control. And so one of mine on my log is that I get short, I start scurrying around and I get super busy, which makes everyone around me very nervous, and especially my husband. So I have to be aware of that and stop that before it kind of makes everyone else lose it around me. So
Yeah, and my tendency during stuff like this, I realized this way too late in life, is usually to shut down. Right, I'm a natural extrovert. I love being around people, doing things. Under stress, under adversity, I tend to shut down and just want to watch TV. Or in college, I would play video games, which is why I lost my scholarship, because I was stressed out and just played video games all day. Well, now I know that about myself, and so I was like, okay, this isn't like I had to coach myself through adversity. And that's the thing to realize with this is it's a process, right? If you're just now acknowledging like, man, maybe I don't handle adversity very well. Great. Step one, right? Step one is realizing like, I don't handle adversity very well. And I would say as part of that, join the club, because very few of us actually do. You're not alone. That doesn't make you weak. That doesn't make you a bad leader. It just makes you probably an accidental leader. And so to realize like, oh, you know what? I don't handle that very well. What would it look like if I did handle it well? Like picture what a healthy version of you would look like in the midst of adversity, and then start taking steps toward that. And to Tracy's point, it's a great idea of asking people like, hey, what do you see me do during adversity? Because sometimes we don't see it in ourselves very well. We need others to draw that out of us, to point that out on us. And then the key, when you ask that, don't get defensive when they answer it. Mm-hmm. Well, you typically do this, and this. Oh gosh, I wasn't asking for you to like pile on. It's like, well, you asked how I handle adversity. So be willing to listen to that answer, because your intent is you're trying to get better and that person's trying to help you. And so to understand what a healthy version of you would look like in the midst of adversity, and saying, okay, I'm not there yet, but I can get there, right? Because you're going to face adversity. It could be every day. So to give yourself permission to not be great at handling it today, maybe be better at it tomorrow, and a little better the next day, and a little better the next day. And what you'll find when you put these things into practice is that suddenly you become someone who's actually great at handling adversity. And that's the result of daily practice, of putting into place certain habits to think better, to understand yourself better, to lead yourself better. All of a sudden it's like, oh, adversity. Okay, that's all right. I know what to do here. I know who I am. I know what I would typically do, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to do this. And at some point you'll wake up and you are that person. And so believing that that is in you, that you are able to handle adversity well, regardless of your personality, you are able to handle personality well, regardless of the people around you, of how you've been raised, how you've handled it in the past. You can get better at handling adversity. And I would say you must get better at handling adversity if you want to be a leader, because it's just part of life. It's part of parenting. It's part of marriage. It's part of leadership. It's part of teamwork. It's just part of everything. And so we can choose to get better at handling it so that we can have more influence, have better relationships, and ultimately have better outcomes.
I love it. Great advice, Kevin, as usual. Well, neat. And I was thinking of your boys, they're watching you, right? They're watching you in adversity. They're going, this is how an adult man acts during adversity. And they're getting that by watching their dad, by watching their mom, and all of our children are, all of those around us are. So that's a great reminder as well.
That's right. Yep. And to Lance's point, right? Because like he learned from his parents how to operate in a negative way, but to realize, nope, I don't have to do that. So we have to be aware of, again, people are always watching our leadership. They're always watching our actions. And you know, Joe Hill, one of our giants, I don't know if he came up with this phrase, but it's a great one. Said, don't practice what you preach what you practice. Right. And so like put these, like be who you say you are, do the things that you say matter, and live out those values.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean as leaders we don't ever have a bad day. It doesn't mean we don't ever get down. It's just how we respond to that. So
that's right. That's right.
Great. Love it, Kevin. Thank you so much. You always get us on the right track for the week, and I always appreciate it. So we'll see you right here next week, same time, same place.